Pittsburgh Steeler fans, it is time for another edition of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, deputy editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, joined as by always Geoffrey, Benedict. Geoffrey, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Matt.
Awesome. And we got a very special guest with us this evening here. JT O'Sullivan, former NFL quarterback, host of the QB School. JT, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, y'all. I'm excited for this one.
Perfect. We've been looking forward to having you on. I think we got hooked right around the time your Ben Roethlisberger episode dropped. That was one of our. I think we've talked about that a lot on our Slack channels. But speaking of Ben Roethlisberger, I'm curious how much you think he still has left in the tank, JT.
I mean, it's a fascinating question. I certainly think that he's got enough in the tank to put a magical season together. You know, I think he's been a unique talent for a long time in the league, what he does, how his game has evolved. But I mean, guy's had an unbelievable career on so many different levels, and what that looks like here towards the tail end of it, you know, I think it hopefully continues to get an opportunity to stay healthy, but allow him to be Big Ben, and kind of evolved Big Ben and what that looks like moving forward for them. You know, it's certainly put a lot of fear and issues in that division for a long time, and just hoping for another great run for him.
JT, in your video where you covered Ben Roethlisberger, you talk about him doing Big Ben things, and what's kind of a classic Big Ben thing is him just taking throws that really aren't there and just making them anyways. Just can you dig into that a bit for Steeler fans to understand just how different it is for Ben Roethlisberger compared to like a quarterback who is doing exactly what the offense is designed to do?
Who's not big.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I always think of, and I know this is an oversimplification, but there's that, I think it's somewhat viral video of him like doing that quarterback drill where people are like moving around like little medicine balls, and he's just like, get off me, get off me, get off me, make a throw. And there's an element of that he's just always done. He's had this playmaker ability, kind of stand back there like a big redwood tree, bounce off of them, make some, crazy throw, and has always been able to like keep that franchise relevant and around. And that's, to me, is doing Big Ben things. I think the other thing that he does, and I'm jealous of it on a number of different levels, is never anywhere close to that, but he's got the ability to turn down throws, meaning that it looks like a pump fake, but really he's going to throw it, and then he decides not to and turns it down. And then he's able to get onto something else or keep the play alive and find something better. And so it's not necessarily a pump fake, but it's almost like Tiger Woods stopping in his backswing. It's just once you get going, it's hard to kind of like have the strength, have the ability, have that kind of decision to turn it down that he's always been able to do. Now, I've seen it the vast majority of the time it goes really well. Sometimes it can go sideways. I remember one year I was in Cincinnati, and we rolled through that division, beat everybody that year, and he had a couple turnovers against us, and he's trying to do too much that occasionally creeps into that type of game. But geez, for the longest time, he's been doing it at such a high level that it's just a unique skill set because he's so big, has been able to make so many plays like that from within and without the pocket, just hard to bring down.
Now, for a number of years here, it seems like anytime someone's coming out in the NFL draft that's 6'5", 240, people try to compare them to Ben Roethlisberger, but he plays kind of a different game. Would you say he compares to anyone, or is that even a fair assessment for these analysts to try to be throwing their name towards Ben Roethlisberger?
I don't know. I mean, who's an example of someone Big Ben compares to? I honestly, like, to me, it would be like, I don't know, almost like a healthy, smaller Dante Culpepper, like that type of Culpepper was small to me compared to Big Ben. They're still athletic, dynamic, big arms, but like you're talking about guys coming out recently, I can't think of anybody who has that kind of size and still plays the position that way. He plays the position a little bit with like that old school, new school, meaning he's always been able to like be creative, make plays outside the structure of the play. But he's also evolved to get the ball out of his hand quickly and play from within the pocket, and distribute the ball. And so, he's gone through multiple iterations of what that offense has looked like, and it's a tribute to him.
Is that a difficult kind of quarterback for an offensive coordinator to work with and design an offense around when you have someone who can just do his own thing. And I mean, you've been in a lot of quarterback rooms. You've been in a lot of these meetings. What is that like if you have a quarterback who can kind of just do his own thing and have success, and the offensive coordinator is trying to create an offensive structure, around that?
I mean, geez, I don't think it would ever be viewed as a negative. I guess it could be if you thought like they were just going rogue and like going recess on you, on some of these plays, which I don't think is the way for any professional quarterback I've ever been around. They try to execute the offense at the highest level possible. And if it's not there, hey, I'm not going to take a sack. Let's go create. Let's get on the edge. Let's do a scramble drill. Let's do those types of things that some of the guys are just better at, and more, whether it's more athletic, the vision down the field, playmaker ability, those types of things. I don't necessarily think it's a play caller I've ever been around would be like, hey, instead of getting outside the pocket, if it's not there, why don't you go ahead and just take a sack or eat it? I think that they think of it as almost like a get out of free jail card. Like, hey, I remember being around Mike McCarthy when he was the offense coordinator in New Orleans for my first 3 years in the league. And he used to tell us all the time, we're going to have 5 scramble plays a game, 5 of them. If we can get one big play and, 3 or 4 completions out of that, that's going to save me as a play caller. That's going to move the chains, keep moving the chains. 3 or 4 extra first downs is big in an NFL game.
Now, transitioning to the Steelers backup here, Mason Rudolph, you hear a lot in the kind of the national spotlight that a lot of people think he's definitely not the option moving forward. And then kind of more locally, you hear some rumblings that he's improving and he's growing on his game. I'm just curious if you think someone like that could be the future of the team.
I don't know anything about Mason Rudolph, to be honest with you. I would be doing you guys a disservice if I told you one way or the other, honestly. I think that I hear the same thing that you hear as far as there's potential for them to make a move and bring someone else in to compete with that spot for what that looks like. That probably tells you, enough of what the organization believes is the long-term future of that position. I think it'll be fascinating to see what they do in the draft. But as far as me telling you that Mason Rudolph can play or can't play as a long-term answer, I would just be speculating.
Now, just to kind of build off that, I guess, when it comes to taking a mid-round quarterback, it seems to be a little different than obviously that top 5 flashy pick. How long should it take for a mid-round guy to kind of develop and kind of potentially make themselves the starter?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I think it really depends on the situation. I think that the Steelers, for me, are one of the more interesting places to land if you're a young quarterback in this draft. They're not young; they're all young, but like someone who is thinks that they're an NFL starter caliber guy right now. And so, like, I think of a guy like Kellen Mond. Like, I'm a big fan of Kellen Mond. I think depending on the situation he's in, he's got the opportunity to be very successful. Got a skill set that translates well to Sundays. Obviously needs to be a little bit more consistent, but could be someone that could really thrive by watching Ben Roethlisberger, how he operates as a pro, how he plays, how he prepares, how he does all those things, and then given an opportunity at some point, compete for the job. And so he's not the only one. There are a number of guys that could potentially fall into that tier. But as far as like, hey, he's a 3rd round pick, we got to give him 2 or 3 years. I think it, it's hard to kind of make up artificial barriers like that. I think more of it is you look across the landscape of the league, the guys who are really good. I'm thinking like Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. They got the opportunity to sit for a little bit, even Patrick. And so the idea being that, hey, if we can get a guy that we think can be the long-term future here, let's make that investment now. Let's invest in him learning, being ready to go when he gets an opportunity to go. So it'll be fascinating to see what, if anything, the Steelers decide to do.
With this year for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they are turning over control of the offense from Randy Fichtner, who was Ben Roethlisberger's quarterback coach and then took over as the offense coordinator, to Matt Canada, who has always run a very different style of offense. For a situation like that, for when you have a veteran quarterback and you have a brand new guy coming in who runs something incredibly different, like, how difficult is that? Is that a situation where you kind of make it meet in the middle? Is that a situation where, your offense coordinator is going to the quarterback and saying, hey, how are we going to make this work? Like, in your experience, like, how is that situation kind of resolved between an offensive coordinator and a veteran quarterback?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes, all the way across the board. I think it is probably somewhere in the middle. I think that you would be silly for the coach not to use Roethlisberger as a great kind of sounding board, well, but also kind of a barometer for what he can handle, what he wants to handle, what he's comfortable playing, what he has experience playing. It would be silly to scrap that and be like, hey, we're going to install my stuff because it's my stuff. I don't think that happens, outside of bad stories. And so it's just an idea of being what that looks like. I always think when things like that happen, it's a lot less about what training camp is like and a lot more about what does the team look like in December? What does the team look like in Thanksgiving when they've had an opportunity, kind of like the Bucks this year. If you looked at the Bucks early in the season, it kind of looked like a hodgepodge of some of Tom's plays, some of what they'd been doing beforehand. And then you look at them at the end of the year, and it's probably a mixture, but probably more of what Brady was comfortable running and had experience running. And so what it looks like, I would imagine it's something similar to that. But obviously, they made that decision to go with that coach for a reason. And so they obviously want to use that skill set, but also it would, I just imagine if you were going into a job and there was someone who was really good at their job that's available for you as a resource. Yeah, let's use it. Let's do what they want to do.
Now, JT, I'm curious the difference in relationships when it comes from a quarterback and offensive coordinator and a quarterback and a quarterback coach specifically.
Yeah, I think it depends. It depends on the situation. I think the quarterback coach is oftentimes a kind of conduit between the coordinator and the position, whether it's, is there an established starter? Is it a competition room? What does that look like? But oftentimes the coordinator just doesn't have the time to sit down and meet every single quarterback meeting and go over every single snap that a quarterback coach does. So really every situation is different. If it's the play caller, the former quarterback coach, and now they've established someone to be the quarterback coach and take over, that type of thing. Again, it's just different I've been in situations where you never see the coordinator except for, the overall install of the game plan. And then I've been in some situations where the coordinator is in every meeting and we're watching every snap of practice, every snap of preparation together. And so it really just depends on how they want to differentiate what their roles and responsibilities are. And I think it matters who the starter is. I think it matters if there's a long-term relationship there, if they already know each other, they don't necessarily have to understand the expectations for every single play that sometimes you do in a new staff or a new coordinator, a new play caller, those types of things.
All right. The Steelers currently have Mason Rudolph and they have Dwayne Haskins sitting behind Ben Roethlisberger. For a rookie coming in, if they do draft a rookie, bring in a guy this draft, a deep room like that where clearly someone is going to get, not going to be there. They're not going to carry four quarterbacks. But there's also so much potential with Ben Roethlisberger being at the end of his career to really take the reins of a franchise. Is that a tough spot for a rookie to go into, or do you think that kind of depth around him would be beneficial?
I mean, it depends, I guess. If you're a 6th round draft pick, yeah, that's going to be a tough spot. If you're a 1st round draft pick, 2nd round draft pick, you don't. They're invested in you. You're not getting cut. And so, all of a sudden, to me, I think every team would love to have that kind of problem, have that kind of depth. I probably am a bigger fan of Dwayne Haskins than the majority of people across the landscape of the league. If you just ask now, I think that certain plays and certain decisions, certain optics certainly haven't been good enough to be an established guy in the league, but to just scrap what I think his potential was moving forward. I think it's a great play by the Steelers to take a chance and see what that looks like development-wise moving forward. I just think it's a good problem to have. I know people love to say, if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Well, the game has evolved. It really has. You can see what happens when, some teams lose their starter and they go in the toilet for the rest of the year. Some teams lose their starter and win a Super Bowl. And so I think it's a strategic advantage to have a deep room. I think it's difficult to have a deep room for the long term, but if you can have a deep room as often as possible and create that kind of competitive environment, that's just the name of the game. It doesn't matter where you go. Every quarterback room thinks that they're deep. Now they're obviously not all deep like that, but that's just the reality of every position group in every organization across the board. And so it's a little bit more prolific when it's the quarterbacks and everybody knows the quarterbacks and everybody knows, the national names.
Now, you mentioned Dwayne Haskins. I'm curious, JT, if you have any kind of insight or any thoughts on why he kind of failed in Washington.
I don't have any insider stuff. I know some of the people that were in Washington. I've never spoken to them about what they think or what did or didn't happen. I think it's a combination. When things like this happen, it's never just one thing. I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a new Ron Rivera coming in there, changes made to the offensive staff. I think expectations, and then at the end of the day, it's just performance. Like, it just wasn't good enough to be a consistent starter. You get an opportunity in the league, you get a very finite number of opportunities in the league to play, and if you don't make the most of it, they're going to move on from you pretty quickly, and that's just unfortunately the way it happened for him. And now the thing about it is, you look across the landscape of the league, and there are a number of guys that are on their second or third organization that are pretty good football players that, depending on the situation they're in, all of a sudden look like they're a lot better. I think the easy name is like Tannehill, but even guys like, Sam Darnold's another example. He's going to go to get a fresh start. What does that look like? Is he able to make the most of that situation? Is that a better situational fit for him, better organization, all those types of things? And you just never know. I think like guys like Michael Vick, to get another opportunity at a different organization, obviously different circumstances. But again, it really does depend on luck. I personally am a big fan of the stability that the Steelers bring to to a player, and that type of mindset that you're just not going to get at every single organization. I'm not going to take shots at certain organizations, but you look across the landscape of the league, and there are teams that have been stable, successful, long-term winners, somewhat consistent, and there are teams that haven't. And so I think it matters if you're a young quarterback, if you're fortunate enough to be at one of those franchises.
Okay, looking at this draft class with the quarterbacks, how many quarterbacks do you see, or do you imagine get taken before the Steelers pick? We picked 24th this year. Is there going to be, how many quarterbacks can realistically go that high?
I mean, I'm not like a mock draft guru. I don't even, I don't really think about it. I think that there are at least 6 first-round quarterbacks in this draft. Now, will there be 6 taken in the first round? I don't know. I think that there certainly could be a run really quickly. It'll be interesting to see what actually happens in San Francisco. And then, depending on who's available, that could potentially make people move up and move around, those types of things. But there could be a run in the top 10 like we've never seen before. So it's just a matter of what's available at 24. You're absolutely right. If you're all of a sudden, again, you're not going to draft someone that you have a, 3rd round grade on at pick 24 just because you want a quarterback. That's not going to, there might not be someone available that you want at that spot. So we'll, I don't have an answer for you. I can tell you that I think that this class is deep. I don't think it's quite as great as everyone thinks it is, but I think it's deeper at the top than probably most people realize.
Now, earlier today, I heard your hit on Vancouver radio, kind of ranking the top quarterbacks here, going Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson. I'm curious the next list of names and how you'd kind of order them, perhaps even going 5 deep past them.
Geez, I don't know if I can go 5 deep past them. I would say, I personally, I'm a big fan. I think it's pretty obvious if you follow the channel. I'm a big fan of Justin Fields. I also don't think that Trevor Lawrence, I know Trevor Lawrence has been the clear-cut guy for so long that he kind of gets a pass as far as the full evaluation that a lot of people are doing on him. So that to me is interesting to circle back on in a few years to see how it pans out in Jacksonville with the Urban Meyer experiment. And then I'm a big fan of Zach Wilson too. He throws the ball really well. I'm very jealous of the way that he can spin it, those types of things. I think that those 3 guys have established themselves as the class of the class. And then from there, I think Trey Lance is a very intriguing prospect. I really do. I think he's got a huge upside. I think he showed a lot for a young college player at a really good program. I think it's unfortunate that he's gotten kind of coveted out of the opportunity to evolve and take his game to the next level, at least in front of scouts and players on tape. I do such an incomplete analysis because all I do is tape. And it's certainly an important part of it, but I'm never talking to the prospects. I don't know where they are in their development, those types of things. So Trey Lance falls in the next group for me. Obviously Mac Jones for a lot of people. I probably am higher on Kellen Mond than I am on Mac Jones. I know that's probably not what most people hear or say. That's just me. I personally really like Kellen Mond. I think he's a little stiff. You know, I would prefer him to be looser just because I think it leads to more consistency, a better stroke as far as being able to spin it, ball control. And then from there, I think it kind of falls into like Kyle Trask, Davis Mills, you know, that tier, which is not a bad tier. That's like a mid-round tier for me in a really deep class. And then you start getting into, you know, are those the guys that the Steelers try to make a move on in the middle of the rounds where, you know, I couldn't tell you the difference between Mason Rudolph and Kyle Trask. I really couldn't.
Okay, with a guy like, you covered a little bit on Kellen Mond earlier. With a guy like a Kyle Trask, what does he bring to the field? What does he bring? What are his strengths in his game?
I mean, he had a great season this year. You know, unless you're watching a lot of, you know, Florida Gator football, you probably flies under the radar a little bit. But he had a great season all the way up until the end. Now the wheels came off there at the end. There's a lot of reasons why that happened, especially in this season where people were tapping out towards the end, especially with bowl games, not going into games, you know, fully armed as far as your weapons on the perimeter. When you go back and watch him throw, he's got some great deep ball accuracy. He's playmaker, being really consistent with the ball. Now, those things fall off at the end of the year. I think off the top of my head, they lose 3 games towards the end, and they're kind of sloppy, ugly games. And it's just that part of it leaves a sour taste in your mouth, a little bit of like recency bias. But when you go back and look at the entire body of work from 2020, I was not shocked. I was just impressed with how well he delivered the ball, how consistent he was throwing the ball, what went into his game to be able to have the stats that he had. And it comes from the consistency of the ball location, the decision making at the first 2/3 of the season. Now, the last part, you know, you'd love to figure out, you know, what exactly went wrong, where to go sideways, those types of things.
Now, when it comes to the draft, we've kind of seen in recent years the quarterback position going higher and higher. Of course, most important position in the game. With this year's kind of draft, we're kind of buckling up to see potentially 5 quarterbacks go in that kind of top 10 picks. Do you think that has something to do with how talented these guys are, or is just the quarterback position in general become so important that you have to try to get as much talent as early as you possibly can get it?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I think the other variable that I would add to that is that the position and game has evolved, right? I mean, it's more offensive friendly. It's as offensive friendly as it ever has been. The other part of it is the position has evolved, where you're running the quarterback, where the younger levels of football have changed, where now potentially, you know, a decade ago, 2 decades ago, the best athlete might not play quarterback. Nowadays, the best athlete is playing quarterback. And so you see great athletes. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is a huge dude. He's a freak of an athlete. Zach Wilson is a better athlete than you think. You turn on the film, he's twitchy, he's explosive. Justin Fields is obviously a freak of an athlete. Kellen Mond, very good athlete. These guys are the best, some of the best athletes on the field of freaks. And so it's one of those things where I think it's harder to pass on guys like that or not take advantage of that type of skill set when it's all of a sudden available and you have one of those picks. And so I think all of those reasons are why that kind of, yes, the position is the most important in the game. Yes, coveted, you don't get an opportunity to pick that high, very rare. You hopefully very rarely, and then you want to take advantage of it unless you've got an established guy and or a guy you're already invested in.
All right, now you said you like Kellen Mond better than Mac Jones, so I want to give you a chance to talk about what you see in Mac Jones, because he is someone that the Steelers are getting, that has been mocked frequently to the Steelers, and that people are talking about possibly being a guy the Steelers would pick up. So what are your thoughts on Mac Jones?
I really like Mac Jones. I think it's very impressive the year that he had. He had a great year. I think I hesitate to use this word because it's so cliche right now, thrown around, but you can see how well he plays the game from within his own head, meaning that he's processing, he's getting through things quickly. He's not forcing the ball down the field. He's being very smart. He's running that offense at a really high level. I think the thing that for me was interesting to go back and watch the Mac Jones film was just to see the difference between the style of play that they played with Tua and the style of play that they played with Mac Jones. Not different bad, almost different good a little bit, because it was a little bit more play actiony, a little bit more down the field, different types of throws, not as RPO heavy. And so it was refreshing to see them be able to adapt and change to what Mac Jones does really well, and then him go out and do it at a really high level. He didn't necessarily, he just changed the way that they play offense. Now, obviously, he was surrounded by really good players, and everybody in the draft was surrounded by really good players. Clemson has really good players. Ohio State has really good players. So I never loved that take on it, but for me, I loved how quickly he processes. He's quicker than you think. He's not fast, right? Like, he's not going to get out and run away from someone in the NFL. But is he quick enough and subtle enough to move around in the pocket, create space? Yes. Is it as good as Joe Burrow like last year? No. But it's that kind of world where he's subtle enough to be able to make plays from within the confines of the pocket. But maybe not when a play totally breaks down and he's got to get outside the pocket and use his vision, make somebody miss, spin around. He's not going to do that type of stuff. But he is going to be able to create some time, move around, be creative from within the pocket, and deliver the ball down the field. Be accurate, show anticipation, be smart with the ball. All the things that many franchises would love to have in their quarterback position. So yeah, he's an intriguing prospect.
One of the names we haven't mentioned yet today, Davis Mills, is someone that seems to be kind of climbing up some draft boards. I know there's some people that view him as the sixth best quarterback in this class. Are you able to speak on him and why he's kind of viewed in so many different positions?
Yeah, I had a lot of people on the channel reach out to me about him. I ended up doing almost a week of videos just on Davis Mills. I didn't know much about him beforehand. He certainly has flashes of throws that look like they're Sunday type throws, meaning drive throws down the field, outside the numbers, anticipation throws, deep balls, things that you have to kind of be able to do to play in the league for a long time. Definitely don't think it was as consistent as the rest of those guys at the top of the draft. I also don't think he's quite as dynamic of an athlete, not necessarily a bad athlete. He's still a big, strong dude, looks the part. But those guys at the top, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Kellen Mond, even Trey Lance, those guys are freak athletes. They are explosive, twitchy, can create on their own. Davis Mills is not going to get out and, run power read in the red area or, create kind of consistently outside the pocket. And not that those are disqualifiers. There's just limits to what his athletic ability, I think, can bring compared to those other guys. And that's why you don't hear him mentioned quite in that top tier, but he's certainly worth mentioning and worth exploring if you're looking for that mid-round, early mid-round opportunity to add depth to the room. Absolutely.
Looking at this draft class with the crazy season that college football had in 2020, in your opinion, just estimate, how difficult would it be for a quarterback facing such an irregular season, not being able to really get into quite a set schedule, not as much as you're used to, and with all the craziness that COVID has brought, do you think that could affect the draft and how teams view the quarterbacks in this class?
I think it's definitely going to be a factor. I think I was mentioning it to someone today. It'll be fascinating to go back in 5 years and see who were the players that either decided not to play or, sat out or were severely impacted by the COVID experience. And, who gets a steal early in the second round from someone who didn't play this year that all of a sudden looks like a clear cut. What do we miss? Well, he didn't play for a year, and the recency bias is a big thing. And I think it will be fascinating to see what organizations do. Do they take a swing on someone who didn't play this past year because of all the work they put in before the pandemic? Those types of things that I think will be really interesting to go back and see. I could only imagine how difficult it would be to play quarterback when you don't get to practice, you don't get to do the off-season work with your teammates, you don't get to, get that timing, that detail, the nuance of what a really precision passing game takes. It's all taken away from you. And then you have to come into a condensed short season, all sorts of uncertainty, ambiguity surrounding you. Maybe a opponent cancels or, you have to reschedule or things like that. That's just out of whack in a normal football. Football is so scheduled and regulated. You know exactly where you're supposed to be next. And that's just not the case anymore. It's certainly not the case in football at any level right now. And so the people that are able to make the most of those situations, I think, will end up rising to the top through this experience. But I'm telling you right now, there will be people that will think back on it and be like, I can't believe, we didn't talk more about Jamie Newman. Well, and I'm not saying Jamie Newman specifically, but guys who opted out who, we just don't get an opportunity to see the growth from, that some of these teams get to go see and are like, wow, this guy looks like a different human being. Well, it's been 18 months. Yeah, they grow, they get better, they improve, all those types of things that I think will be fascinating.
JT, before we let you out of here, I have to ask about your time with the Saskatchewan Roughriders and playing with Corey Chamberlain.
Oh, do you know Corey?
I didn't work with him personally, but I spent some time with some CFL guys.
It was an interesting experience. I really enjoyed the Saskatchewan fan base. The league is really cool. I got a chance to visit a bunch of the great Canadian cities, got a chance to vacation up there a little bit. I had a blast. I really did. I would love to have played more. It didn't work out playing wise, but the actual experience of being on a team, the organization, the fan base, it was great. I had a blast.
Awesome. JT, thank you so much for your time. Before we let you go, if there's I know you got the QB school, if there's anything else you want to plug before we let you get out.
No, I appreciate you mentioning the quarterback school. I have a lot of fun with it on YouTube. And then if you're looking for just more of that type of content, the deeper dive stuff, is the courses that are available. But again, I really have fun with the channel. It's fun to go back and forth and just have fun with football.
Love it. Thank you so much again for coming on with us today. And we'll let you get on with the rest of your day.
Appreciate it. Y'all take care.
Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, that was JT O'Sullivan of the QB school, former NFL quarterback, of course, and CFL quarterback, like we briefly mentioned there. But we are at the top of our half hour here. So if you're listening on the podcast platform, make sure you're clicking over to the second part. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, just hang tight. Pittsburgh Steelers fans, we are back with the second half of the Curtain Call podcast. My name is Michael Beck, joined as always by Geoffrey Benedict. Geoffrey, what did you think of JT O'Sullivan and that little interview we had there?
I always enjoy his stuff. I watch his channel a lot. As people who go to the website know, I do a lot of film rooms. I have no clue what it's like being a quarterback. I've never played quarterback outside of backyard football. So for me, I started watching his film before he was doing college breakdowns on the quarterbacks. I was watching his stuff on like how quarterbacks read the defense. Why do quarterbacks do this? Why do you see this coverage? Like break down things and pass protection. He has so many videos on there. I don't know if people know this. The QB school was originally designed to help young quarterbacks learn to play the quarterback position better. He has a lot of courses designed for that, which if you know someone who's a young quarterback or wants to get better playing quarterback, sure, yeah, hook them up with that. But also, if you just want to learn more about football from a quarterback perspective, it's a great channel. There's all kinds of things on there. And his film rooms on this quarterback class are incredible. He has over 12 hours of film on the major guys. He has like 4 episodes on Mac Jones. He has 2 hours of film work on Zach Wilson. And if you join his Patreon, he has even more. He does full game breakdowns. It's incredible. So he is a great resource for that kind of quarterback idea. And you don't get hot takes. You don't really get rankings as much as we even saw here. He's not really as much into ranking the quarterbacks as just breaking down their film and showing, hey, on this play, they did this badly. On this play, they did this really well. And it's really great to see what the quarterbacks actually play like and get an idea, because he'll cover, what the offensive concepts are, what the defense is doing, what you would expect the quarterback to do, or what you would expect from an offense with this design. It's really fascinating, really good stuff to watch. And it's helped me a lot understand how quarterbacks view the game for when I'm breaking down film. So I loved it. And I love most of the things he does, but the Ben Roethlisberger, his take on Ben Roethlisberger was phenomenal. If you haven't seen it, go to the QB school on YouTube and search for his episode on Ben Roethlisberger. One of the great things he shows in there is Ben Roethlisberger throwing plays where he's like, all right, if you look at the defense, and you look at this play, the open throw is this guy, and instead Ben Roethlisberger throws to this guy for a touchdown. And you shouldn't make that throw. It's not the throw you should make when you see the defense and you see that, but he just does it. And he says in there, he's like, but that's just Big Ben doing Big Ben things. And it stood out to me that is Ben Roethlisberger making plays where he shouldn't make plays. And then it also helps explain why some days when his accuracy isn't fully there, or he's just not having quite as good of a game, he's making horrible plays where he's making the same throws. It's just to the other team because he doesn't have it that day.
And I can't stress enough, how often are you getting film breakdown from someone who's played in the NFL for over a decade? Like, you're not finding that anywhere else. So as much as we plug behind the steel curtain, if you want some great quarterback breakdown, make sure you're following JT, the quarterback school. He is giving you a ton of information. But as for us, we know a thing or two about quarterbacks and the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would hope. Geoffrey, as we sit here today, do you think this team will end up drafting another quarterback in a couple weeks' time?
I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I think they really are high on Mason Rudolph. And as JT was plugging Dwayne Haskins, he's high on him. There's potential there. There's much more potential, I think, there than when some of the other projects we've picked up and kind of given a shot. He's got talent. It's still there. It's whether he's able to put it together and get it going inside of the Pittsburgh offense.
Yeah, you know what? My kind of bold take on this one, I feel like if he becomes the undrafted free agent, that being Ian Book, I think they might try to look to bring him in, not necessarily to be the next great quarterback, just because they've talked about adding someone. And Ian Book is a guy, I believe he ran like a 4.39 at Notre Dame's Pro Day, and they could look to do what the Patriots did with Julian Edelman, or the Steelers once did with Hines Ward, these guys that were quarterbacks before and moving them out to receiver positions. Do you think the Steelers could opt to go a route like that and try to pick someone up with athletic upside that could transition another spot just to try to maybe fill two holes at the same time?
I think with a guy like Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, you can't rule it out because that's the kind of player that you could put in, like they tried to do with Josh Dobbs, where they put him in for certain running plays. You could do that with an Ian Book, but you could also use him. If he shows he can play other position, you could use him in other ways and still have the option of him throwing the ball. It's definitely a possibility. I think it's a guy that you could pick up late and kind of take a wild card on.
So we did talk a bit about Ben Roethlisberger in the first part here. I'm curious. We did ask JT how long we thought Ben would play, but I'm curious your thoughts on this one. Do you think this really is the swan song for Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger, or is he coming back for more?
I think he will play more. He's a football player. I mean, you watch how he plays the game. He loves the game. He lives and dies on the field. He's just a football player. And I don't think he's ready to hang it up. I don't know when he will be, but I think we've got at least 2 seasons out of him. Now,
with this, do you think Ben Roethlisberger could be a guy that just plays until the Steelers say, "Look, Ben, you don't have it anymore. You're done"? Is that kind of what we're kind of looking at here?
I think he has people around him that will tell him that. Because he seems like, if you watch the Bigger Than Ben YouTube series he put out, he trusts people to tell him, hey, you're not doing it, you need to shut it down, you need to, this is the process you need to go through, you're too banged up. I think if it comes down to the point, for me with Ben, I think it will be the point where his injuries, where he's physically not able to handle the workload, where he's physically not able to do it enough, and I think at that point he's got people that will tell him, hey, it's time to shut it down.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that as well. Heck, I think we were talking about it the other day, but if Ben Roethlisberger were to even win a Super Bowl this year, I'm not sure if he's hanging his cleats up for that either. I think there's something to be said for Ben or Terry Bradshaw having 4, and that might try to drive Ben to try to match the all-time leader when it comes to this franchise. Do you think that's reasonable to expect, or if lightning struck and the Steelers are hoisting a Lombardi, would that make a swan song for Ben?
I think that would, because I think seeing how Jerome Bettis went out. But if Ben thought we could win another one, he'd be like, you know what? We're gonna go get another one. We're gonna go get number 4. I could see him also doing that. He in my opinion, Ben is just that guy. He's gonna keep playing until he can't. until he just can't make throws. I remember when Hines Ward said he was going to play until he couldn't outrun it, until he couldn't run away from defenders anymore. And then he played well past that.
Yep.
He played 2 seasons past that. That's kind of how I view Ben. I think Ben's going to play until the people he trusts tell him, hey, you're done. You really need to stop.
Yeah, I can totally see that happening as well. Now, before we kind of move on to the other quarterbacks, I'm curious to know what you think on this. Ben Roethlisberger, of course, has 2 Super Bowl rings, 2 out of 3. Been to 3, of course. Do you think that's more impressive to do in the free agency era, where typically teams win the Super Bowl and the talent kind of just immediately kind of spills out because their contract value skyrockets? Do you think 2 to 3 is as equal as 4 for 4 back in an era before free agency even existed?
No, it's still the same in my opinion. Because while the Steelers had that team together for so long, Dallas Cowboys did too. The Oakland Raiders had really good teams, and they kept those teams together. So you're facing off against teams that know you. Like they were facing teams that knew them, that they had bad blood between them, and it's a lot of the same players. It's really hard to go in and consistently beat someone who knows you, as we know with the Ravens and Steelers. Even if one team's clearly better, it's still a tough win. So for me, the changes and the differences, they kind of offset, and I think it's just about as impressive in any era.
Now, before we even get to training camp and figuring out where Dwayne Haskins stands, do you have any opinion on who you think will end up being the number 2 to Ben Roethlisberger this year? Is it clear cut that this is Mason Rudolph? Is Dwayne Haskins just a camp arm per se, or is there something really kind of brewing here at that backup quarterback spot?
I think it's going to be Mason Rudolph. Simply because I think you're going to have to see Mason Rudolph struggle for Dwayne Haskins to get a chance. Just same way Devlin Hodges had to. The Steelers have an investment in Mason Rudolph. They have almost no investment at all in Dwayne Haskins. He's going to have to really outplay Mason Rudolph to take Mason Rudolph's job. This is not at all a fair competition. This is not a straight up, whoever's better wins that job. It's not going to be that. Dwayne Haskins has to really outplay Mason Rudolph to take that spot from him.
I completely agree with you on that one. And then I guess when we even look further ahead to 2022, Ben Roethlisberger will be a free agent, as will Mason Rudolph. Dwayne Haskins will be a restricted free agent. So that basically means if he makes a team this year, that tender, I'm sure, will be picked up, especially because an original round tender would cost significantly less because he is that first round pick. Now, who do you kind of foresee being the quarterback in 2022, a year from now? Could that person potentially not even be on the roster as we sit here today?
If I had to set odds for it, I'm going to go 40% Ben Roethlisberger, 50% chance it's Mason Rudolph, and 10% chance it's Dwayne Haskins. I don't think it's going to be anyone off the roster because I really don't think the Steelers add anyone this season.
So let's just say there's a world where this Russell Wilson trade talk explodes again, or any quarterback, or say Matt Ryan gets released because Atlanta drafted a quarterback this year. Could they kind of dive into that market if someone is available that is kind of viewed as a franchise type guy?
I don't think so. I don't think the Steelers would. That's kind of not their move. That's kind of like really not the Steelers' move. They like taking a guy and having him for his whole career. I wouldn't see it. I can't see them, especially if it's a trade. I really can't see them trading because a trade for a veteran quarterback is kind of you're creating a 3 or 4 year window because you're missing out on a lot of picks to develop beyond that. And so you're like, we're here now and we're going to really invest in this team the next 2 or 3 or 4 seasons. And then what's after that? You don't know.
And that's a good point as well, because when it comes to drafting these guys, we're seeing this year the top quarterbacks, potentially guys that shouldn't be first round picks, will be selected, possibly in the top 5. Will this team ever be bad enough to get one of these top quarterbacks, or is that going to kind of be the thorn in the side of this team until potentially this defense starts to break apart? Or who even knows what happens down the road, but will they ever be bad enough to get a quarterback that is viewed as one of the top of a draft class?
Well, they've done it before. I mean, Ben Roethlisberger fell to him. I could see a quarterback falling. The way quarterbacks are now, as many as are being taken, there's still more that are falling. And the league really, in all honesty, is more forgiving. Like if you picture the league back in 2004 to 2008, and you put this current Ben Roethlisberger in that league, he wouldn't cut it. Like the physical abuse would be too much for him. Like he can go in right now and not get hit much. You couldn't do that reliably back then. It's a much easier league for young quarterbacks to develop, in my opinion. It's a lot less punishing when you have a quarterback that is a little bit slow because they just don't have that experience. It's not as harsh for them, and I think that really, really helps to let these quarterbacks develop. Whereas other times, you would have a quarterback who, maybe they could develop into a really good quarterback, but they're not going to get the chance. Like you think of like a David Carr in Houston, who was really talented, or even Tim Couch in Cleveland, where they had those talent. They had the talent. They just never really developed because they were under fire from the moment they came in. They never really had a chance. I don't see it as bad in the current NFL. And so I think you can find quarterbacks a little later, and I think they eventually will. But you'll probably be a lot like the last time. You'll have some really good starters in there. You'll have some solid guys. You're not likely to get a transition straight from Ben Roethlisberger to, the next franchise quarterback.
With that being said, we know Mike Tomlin was at Ohio State's pro day, getting buddy with Justin Fields, who perhaps could be the guy that ends up slipping down the draft board. Of course, JT O'Sullivan has him as his number 2, as you heard earlier in this podcast. But say a guy like that, or Trey Lance, rather. I'm combining names here. But say someone slips to like 10, 11, 12 in that range. Could you potentially see the Steelers making a trade up because someone slides back in that kind of top 10 to where the Steelers might have enough capital to move up for a quarterback? Is this the year to do it, or is that something they need to wait on?
That would be harsh. Doing that would create a lot of issues, I think, inside the team. Because you've got Ben. Like, you've got holes too. You need a center. You have these other needs. That would be a big sign to me that the Steelers don't really want Ben. Like, they're like, oh, he's back this season. Okay, I guess we'll live with that. But that would be that kind of sign to me that they're already checked out on Ben Roethlisberger and they're looking for the next guy. I know a lot of Steeler fans would love that, because a lot of Steeler fans have made that. They've checked out on Ben Roethlisberger, and they're like, well, we're not winning one with him. Let's move on to the next guy. I don't think they'd get that past the owner. As you know, consistently said, Roonies are all in. They are ride or die with Ben Roethlisberger, and I don't think a trade up, trading valuable draft picks to get a quarterback while Ben Roethlisberger is still playing, I don't think Rooney would go for that.
Kind of transitioning a little bit away from the quarterback-centric stuff here. Do you think this team, and again, I know I've asked you this a couple times in the past, but as we get closer to the draft, I want to keep bringing it up. Is there any more clarity on what's going to happen when the Steelers are on the clock at 24, 55, etc., or is it still just kind of a confusing mess because of how many holes this team has?
It's not super clear. I think there's positions we know aren't going to be addressed. But I think it's opened back up quite a bit. I mean, inside linebacker, cornerback, center, offensive tackle, running back. For goodness sakes, tight end could be on there if the right people fall. Quarterback. To me, looking at the draft, there's so many first round talents that you would rate as being worth a 24th pick, that we're going to get one. We're going to get a good talent at that spot. And I think the Steelers have positioned themselves well to take whoever it is in that spot. And so I think it's kind of still up for grabs. It's going to be based on who falls.
You know, that's kind of my bold take of this draft process, because when you look at what the Steelers historically like to do, they like their first round picks to be someone whose pro day they attended, and they like drafting underclassmen. And when you look at that like 9-team list of pro days that the Steelers did attend, they're plus factoring out that kind of that age thing. Really, there is not many names at all that could realistically be that number 24th overall pick, and kind of leads me to believe that they're not exactly going to follow their traditions, which this offseason they haven't done a lot. My kind of bold take for this draft is someone's ridiculous is going to fall. Someone that shouldn't be there at 24 is going to be, because there's going to end up being 5 quarterbacks, and there's going to end up being X amount of a lot of receivers and some inside linebackers and pass rush. When you start to add it up, especially if a couple running backs were to go before the Steelers, someone silly is going to be there, be it a Christian Darrisaw or Caleb Farley. Both happen to be Virginia Tech guys, but guys that shouldn't be there at 24. Is that something you feel like is a real possibility as well?
Absolutely. I also think like mock drafts, we're told before the mock draft season started, right? They were saying, hey guys, you know, NFL teams and mock drafts, this is going to be rough because there's so little knowledge. There's so much less access for the media and for fans. And there's so much less film on these guys and games being played and games being missed that NFL teams are going to have different grades than mocks, even more than usual, which it's a pretty high level of difference already. And yet we're really, again, buying in to the mock drafts. So in my opinion, my bold prediction for the first round is there's going to be 4 to 5 picks before the Steelers that we're like, whoa, no one saw that coming. And so I think someone's going to fall. And I bet the Steelers might even pass on someone that fans are like, how can they pass on that guy? How can they possibly pass on? But just they have more access than us. And they're like, nope, cross him off. We're going to do someone else. I also feel like I should bring up when Tomlin and Colbert go to a pro day and they visit with a first round pick and they talk to them, that can go bad. They can walk out of the room and say, not that guy. You know, even if they're like saying good things to the guy, because you don't want to be for talking to him in his face and be like, hey, we're not going to draft you. We don't like you personally. Like, we don't like your parents. We don't like your family. We don't like your hometown. And we don't like you. Get out of here. They're not going to do that. Right. So you're not going to hear, oh, they didn't like this guy. But they may be like, hey, we went to their pro day. We saw them. We talked to them, everything. And we decided, no, we're going to go in a different direction. There's so much chaos this year. I am excited to see how the draft plays out, and I think it's going to surprise people.
I completely agree with that. I think there's going to be some names where people are like, who? I thought that was a 4th round pick. It ends up going in the 1st round, and someone that people thought was a deadlock for the 1st round completely sliding out of the 1st or even 2nd round completely. All of that kind of makes sense to me. But when we look at the Steelers right now specifically, and I guess historically, they like to bring a ton of players in for visits, and you see it obviously year in, year out. And in a COVID world, it just isn't possible. And there's these Zoom meetings that we hear about. And a couple times now, I know Zaven Collins and both Najee Harris have been on record and said the entire Steelers staff has been sitting there on Zoom to interview them. To me, that kind of just says like, yeah, they're probably doing that with everyone they're doing these Zoom meetings for. So it might not necessarily be as special as I think some people want to make it. But with all that being said, and where I'm trying to get to is, for some reason, it feels like Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert have been like the stars of the NFL offseason. It seems like their kind of coverage and the amount they've been talked about is crazy, from prospects saying how much they love their meetings to media gushing over them. It really is kind of insane, really, when you think about it, how much they've been talked about. What do you think this stems from, and why are Tomlin and Colbert so popular?
I absolutely love the press they're getting and the talking about them, because if you think about this draft class, is the one they know like the least about. So you are likely to get more picks going to the wrong teams. guys going to teams that don't fit them. You are likely to see this draft class have more turnover. We're already seeing the NFL, young guys changing teams more frequently. We're already seeing that. And for this draft class, that could be bigger. To have Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert have so many talented young players be like, oh man, love the Steelers. Had a great talk with Mike Tomlin. Like, they'd love to play for the Steelers. That could be a very big deal if some of these guys fall. If some of these guys that should be like a 4th round pick end up not getting drafted. Or if they go to training camp and a year from now, they're cut. If they're cut, the Steelers can swoop in. And if you have that relationship, when Mike Tomlin comes and says, man, sorry the draft didn't work out, but we'd really like you to be a Steeler. And you have that thought from your head from when you were there being like, oh man, I love talking to Mike Tomlin and I went to this team and it was awful. Nothing worked out and it didn't fit. I'm going to go to the Steelers. I absolutely love it because there's so much more of the college recruit game, right? Going on in the NFL right now, where you saw Marlon Humphreys being like, Juju, you didn't reply to me. I tried to make a pitch to get you to come to the Ravens. That's college football stuff. That is straight up college football stuff. It is spreading into the NFL. It is going to be more prevalent. So for me, Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert investing time and energy to be the people that these players want to play for has a lot of value.
Now, before we get to the super chat that's in our comments here, I do want to ask you, I feel like this draft there might be a team that ends up like the 74 Steelers that gets 4 Hall of Fame players because they just nail it, because they're so on it, because we don't know a lot about this draft class. And if someone really kind of dials in and just gets it perfect, they could be that team that's having one of those historic classes that sets you up for multiple championships. On the flip side of that, I think we could see a lot of teams wind up with nothing. Is there concern that the Steelers might be the team that has nothing, or could they make lightning strike twice and have another Hall of Fame filled draft class?
I'd go closer to them having a really good draft class this year, in my opinion. Mostly because of the staff they have in place. We like to talk about the Steelers don't draft running backs and that they haven't had the best luck in finding running backs, but we have different coaches in place than we had then. We talk about the Steelers having no success drafting cornerbacks, but we had trouble using cornerbacks until Terrell Austin came. Like, to me, things have changed so much on the Steelers recently that I'm almost excited to see the Steelers take some positions that they traditionally don't do well at and really find someone good. My concern is we're going to draft an offensive lineman like that would have fit Mike Munchak and Todd Haley, right? And doesn't fit what Matt Canada's doing. So that's kind of my thing is I think a lot of times we're still looking at eyes of, who worked out for us in the past? But there's different people evaluating. There's a different system in place than there was then. So I'm very interested in seeing where the Steelers go and what kind of players they draft, because it's a little up in the air now. We haven't seen a cornerback picked since Terrell Austin and since Minkah Fitzpatrick came to the Steelers, because they didn't pick one last year. And we haven't seen running backs. Like we haven't seen running backs under Matt Canada get picked. Like it's very interesting to see. Obviously, Anthony McFarland, who he had a hand with, and it'll be interesting, of course, to see what he does this year. So I'm very interested in what the Steelers are doing, and I think it'll tell us a lot about the Steelers going forward in the draft this season. But it could be very different than what we're used to.
I think we will wrap the show on this super chat from Snowman, who puts $5 in the tip jar. Snowman, thank you for that. He asked, what would be a surprise pick at 24 be like for you? Wow, didn't see that coming. Geoffrey, I'll let you answer that one first.
A quarterback. If they pick a quarterback, I will be like, what? I did not see that happening. That is insane. That's it. That's like the only position. Obviously, a pure guard would be like, what are you even thinking? That's the only position you really have stable. But yeah, a quarterback. would just shock me. I really don't expect the Steelers to take a quarterback early.
Yeah, I suppose if someone fell, like a Justin Fields or someone, I just can't
Justin
even,
Fields at 24.
That'd be crazy. Like
At that point, you're like, at this point, who can we even trade with? Like, who can you even trade down with?
yeah,
Like, someone who took a offensive lineman top 10, like they took Penny Sewell, and you're like, okay, I don't know. That would be insane.
yeah. I think for me, oh man, it's tough. I think a surprise would rather be someone who would be more viewed as like a day 2 or a day 3 pick. Because I like genuinely right now, there's not too much that would surprise me outside of one of the top 5 quarterbacks falling to 24. I couldn't see that happening. Perhaps a Christian Darrisaw, although that's kind of the tackle that to me is like, that could be the guy that slips. So I guess that wouldn't even be surprised to begin with. So, man, it really is a tough question because of how strange this year is. But I guess with all that being said, Geoffrey, is there anything you want to plug before we get out?
Yeah, we just dropped. Dave had the idea for it. We did a Vertex on Dave Schofield, the Stat Geek. He had an idea for just doing a Vertex comparing Justin Lane and James Pierre. And I'm glad he did. I got to watch film focused directly on James Pierre that I hadn't watched before. And wow, I loved doing the Vertex. Go check that out on the website. And other than that, like seriously, go if you are interested in these quarterbacks, if you're interested in this draft class, go check out the QB school. Go out there and look at it. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it really is outstanding content from JT. So thank you to him once again for joining us. When it comes to me, and if you want to continue with some quarterback Steelers content, I had an article drop a couple hours ago at the time of recording, just about people's thoughts on whether or not how they would feel if the Steelers took someone at 24. So you can click over to Behind the Steel Curtain to catch that, as well as some other breaking news and commentary, just anything you could dream of. If you're a Steelers fan, that's the place you want to be. So make sure you're listening to the entire family of podcasts here at Behind the Steel Curtain, clicking over to the website, following us on all our social media platforms. For my co-host, Geoffrey Benedict, my name is Michael Beck. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you soon.